In this video essay, Undoing Appropriateness, Raciolinguistic Ideologies and Language Diversity in Education, I present a summary of the work of Nelson Flores and Jonathan Rosa. Keep watching to discover what raciolinguistics is and its role within education. In this video essay, Nelson Flores and Jonathan Rosa theorize raciolinguistic ideologies, or the co-construction of language and race in education. The authors coined the term raciolinguistic ideologies to describe how expectations about speakers, or the bodies of speakers, relate to ideologies of standardized language and perception of speech. The term highlights connections between how language forms are perceived and the grouping of human beings into hierarchical ranked racial groups. These raciolinguistic ideologies, with language and race conflated, have continued to play an important role in today's continuing coloniality produced by acknowledging only the knowledge/cultural/linguistic systems of populations who exert power over others. Learners of English are often judged on accent, not only in daily interactions with native speakers of English, but also in the classroom. Such linguistic evaluations tend to privilege the perspective of a monolingual or the white listening subject. Within the classroom, the white listening subject may perceive language as non-standard, even when they in fact heard no non-standard language. People of many positionalities can embody the white listening subject because the term describes the act of listening with the white subject position in focus. The white speaking and listening subject with monoglossic language ideologies rejects the legitimacy of racialized language practices in ways that are unrelated to empirical linguistic forms. In U.S. classrooms, the singular goal is to increase competence in standard English, with little or no value placed on the linguistic practices that students from language minoritized backgrounds bring with them. In other words, students must lose the linguistic practices or accent with which they were raised in order to acquire proficiency in standard English. The authors posit that this approach perpetuates a raciolinguistic ideology that uses an appropriateness-based model to advocate explicitly teaching language minoritized users of English the idealized linguistic practices of the white-speaking subject. They propose that the language gap emerges from the racially and socioeconomically stigmatizing language ideologies that guide the ears of listening subjects. Rosa and Flores, 2015. Flores and Rosa apply a raciolinguistic framework to define the education of students in 3 different linguistic categories: long-term English learners, heritage language learners, and standard English learners. For them, the commonality between the 3 groupings is not a question of lack of proficiency in standard English that holds language minoritized users back. Even if a person of color follows the rules for academic language and the discourse of appropriateness, they often experience a racial positioning that frames their linguistic practices as deficient. Consequently, they argue that academic language is not an objective linguistic category, but rather a racialized ideological perception. Linguistic practices can be stigmatized even if the learner conforms to standard practices, because the white native speaker is the model posed as the norm. Therefore, it is not language proficiency that is really being judged, but racial proficiency in a society that positions how language practices are heard by the white listening subject. Flores and Rosa suggest the need for a critical, heteroglossic perspective that both legitimizes the dynamic linguistic practices of language minoritized students, while simultaneously raising awareness about issues of language and power, marks an important starting point for developing this alternative approach. The authors argue for critical approaches that actively counter standard language ideologies, and assert that we must shift the focus of research away from analyzing linguistic forms and towards analyzing positions of enunciation and reception. The author's intention is to shift our perception of the world The solution they suggest is that we must engage with raciolinguistic ideologies and the whitelisting subject that produces them, confront and ultimately dismantle the racialized hierarchy of US society. Whew! Well, that's a wrap on this video. We know it was a lot to take in, and encourage you to go back and listen again. Maybe look up some terms and ideas that you're not familiar with. Remember that learning and unlearning is an ongoing process, and all education takes work. But regardless, we hope you found it inspirational and useful in your own teaching philosophy and pedagogy. And if you did, make sure to press the like button. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure to subscribe to our channel to check out more professional development bites and summaries on educational topics. How did this topic change or stretch your thinking? Or did it stay the same? If you have any questions or comments regarding our topic today, make sure to write them in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your service, educators. Until the next time.